I guess we'll get started. My name is Scott Badger, and I'm the chair of the steering committee that just been formed to work with the consultants, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And thank you all for coming. This is so I'm going to do a sort of a quick introduction. We have a guest speaker, and then we'll open up to more question and answer, that type of thing, and talk about sort of next steps from there. As I'm sure a lot of you are already seeing, Jackson is being, or the Jackson community is being impacted by the lack of available housing in several different ways. First, and almost most obvious, we just have fewer children, fewer kids. And if you look at the graph on the student population here on this infographic, you can see that though the student population at the grammar school has always cycled up and down, and is continuing to cycle, it's now, over the past 10 years, clearly headed down. So not only does that mean fewer children as part of our community, it also means that at some point, if this continues, having a school as part of the community is going to be in jeopardy as well. Really, that would be, in my opinion, a big change to the face of the community here. The fact that there are fewer children also is an indicator that there are fewer young families and therefore fewer young adults as part of the community. And these are really young adults that, by having children, having family here, going to school here, establish roots here and become long-term, valued members of our community. And so that's another segment that's being impacted by lack of available housing. Another group is town employees, teachers, police officers, firefighters, road crew, administrators. These are people that can do a better job if they live in the community that we serve. And again, more and more often, these people are not finding, in both the question of affordability, but also just the question of availability, that there just isn't housing available for these people to live in. And so that also is a detriment to the overall community that we have here in Jackson. And then another segment is those that would like to live out their lives here. Jackson really just doesn't have suitable housing or services for age and place type housing. So it's, in a very broad stroke, it's these types of housing that are causing these types of, or the lack of these types of housing that are causing these types of impacts to our community, real tangible impacts, where we're seeing our community evolve in a completely different profile than I think what we are certainly used to, and probably what everyone here values very highly. In response to this, the Jackson Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen decided to apply for a grant that could then allow us to have the resources to look more closely at the issues that Jackson is facing. We were approved for that grant. We hope to hire a community planning consultant or professional to work with us. That grant will be, it's a warrant at the town meeting on the 15th. The town will vote to accept that grant. We've already been approved for the grant, but there'll be a vote to accept that grant. Once that grant has been accepted, then we have the funds to hire this consultant. As part of that, there's a matching fund portion that we decide to raise through private donations instead of asking the town for it. So that's something that we'll be asking at the end of this meeting. So that again, in a quick nutshell, is sort of the starting point for this process. Really, as far as what we're going to do as we get going in this meeting, is sort of the first instance of that is really the first part of it is to reach out to the community, find out, what does the community want? What do we want to look like in the future? Look at what the needs are to get us to that vision or that goal, and then to start looking at what we might do to address those needs. And so again, that in a nutshell is sort of the issues that we're looking at and the process that we're trying to put in place to address those issues. So next we're going to have a guest speaker, Jesse Wright, who's in the 40 under 40 group, which is a group of millennials. It's an advisory council to the governor to really get that perspective on a variety of issues. And Jessie will sort of give us her, what she sees coming from that perspective in terms of both housing and, the challenges that millennials face in trying to get housing in this area, affordability issues, especially with student debt, etc. And I'll let Betsy provide a better introduction. Thank you. Thanks again.
And I'm Betsy Harding. This issue came up at the last town meeting. Some of you may remember I sort of tossed out a ball at the last town meeting saying I'm concerned about housing issues. If other people are too, let's gather and talk about how we can help make things work. And of course, everybody wants to know, well, where's it going to happen? Who has the land that can, do this? And that's not what we're going to focus on at this point. We're really looking for a consultant to take us outside the box. If all my thoughts are what I already know, and I consider those sort of in the box, we're looking for somebody who can say, but, over in this town, they did that, and it worked pretty well, and you might try doing it this way. So a housing consultant, the one Scott and I were brainstorming with the town about what might work, what one would be best. And the one we selected is one who lives over in Plymouth, who used to be a state planner, working with all the various towns throughout New Hampshire. And so he has seen many towns, the way they've responded to some of these issues, the shortages that we're experiencing. And so we can't get into the specifics about where it might be because we just don't know. And it might not be any new construction. It might be reconstruction of something or other. There are a variety of options that we need to learn about. So we've got Jessie. Jessie, normally when I see Jessie, I'm canoeing on the Saco or some other river because she works with the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. She's also very connected with local farms, food produce, so she has a lot of that kind of information. And she's valuable to us, as Scott was saying, because she's been on the Governor's Millennial Council, and they came up with a study of economy, environment, housing, a variety of things that are happening in New Hampshire or that could be happening better in New Hampshire. So welcome, Jessie. Thanks for being here.
Betsy asked me to come talk, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come talk. Not expecting everybody who lives in Jackson to come. I'm going to start by saying thank you for having me, and I'm terribly under the weather, so I have this crackly voice, and I can't stop drinking the soda water because it's all dried out. Anyways, forgive me for that. That's the first thing. Like Betsy said, my name is Jessie Wright. I work for the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. I grew up here in the valley. I lived in I went to Conway Elementary School, Kennett Middle School. My family moved over to Freiburg when I was in high school, so I graduated from the academy. Made my way in college in Boston. I went to Babson and got my degree in legal studies. Traveled around a little bit, kind of sowed my wild oats, as you will. Lived in Ireland for a couple years, played lots of rugby, traveled, farmed, nannied, and then always knew that I wanted to make my way back to the Mount Washington Valley. I grew up here. This community means a whole lot to me. And so in 2013, I came back and started my master's coursework through Vermont Law School, which was amazing because I was able to do that mostly online and live and work right here in the Mount Washington Valley where I really want to be. And as soon as I was back, I knew that I wanted to get back to my community, so I started volunteering at the Land Trust, through their development committee, where I was looking for volunteers. And that turned into a part-time admin position and more hours, and we wrote some more grants, and I finished my master's in environmental law and policy. And now a lot of the work I do with Land Trust is focused on agricultural landscape, if you will, not just preserving agricultural lands, but what it means to really have a viable agricultural economy here, supporting farms through their marketing and collective efforts, and stuff like that. Happy to talk more about land conservation always and local foods. I can go on and on, but I won't. So just get me afterwards and we can have coffee or talk sometime. In my spare time, I bartend on the weekends at McKelly's, as all millennials do. We have 2 jobs because that's how you make it work here in Mount Washington Valley. You know, we're not quite getting paid Boston salaries to live up here, especially we're working with nonprofits and stuff like that. So I know I see a lot of faces familiar from there as well. And when I have a free minute or two, I'm the chair of the Young Professionals group here in the Mount Washington Valley, called Stay Mount Washington Valley. And that stands for Supporting the Active Young Professionals of the Mount Washington Valley. And that's, I think, what I'm going to focus on, at least talking for a few minutes, because that work really surrounds student debt. And I don't think you can talk about housing and millennials without talking about student debt, because the burden that student debt has on my generation really is delaying adulthood, as they say, not allowing us to kind of move forward with getting mortgages. Our debt-to-income ratio is extreme. So I think what I'll do is just talk a little bit about the work that Stay MWV does, and then kind of my experience in the housing market here, and answer any questions that people have, if that sounds like a good plan. So Stay MWV kind of was born back in 2016 through the Leadership Mount Washington Valley course. And the Leadership Mount Washington Valley course is run through the Chamber and the Economic Council. Been going on for about 10 years. We've got probably over 130 graduates who have gone through that program. It's a 6-month program where young professionals can learn about our community in different ways. Who's who, networking, community connections, what the heck does the water precinct do, and how's that different from the fire department, and how to sit on a board, what it means to be an active kind of member of your community that's leaning in. Really aimed at settling people here in the Valley. You know, if you're going to be a young professional here, how do I really contribute to the community? So part of sitting on a board, of course, is fundraising, as I'm sure you all know. And so each leadership class does a fundraising project. Typically, they would go through the process where the nonprofits kind of fill out an RFP and submit their proposals, and we raise the money, $1,000, $3,000. And it was kind of standard until my class in 2016. And what happened in 2016 is we were having all these conversations about why is there no young people here? You know, what's happening? What's going to happen as the silver tsunami comes, right? Like, it's not there. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And those conversations kind of all happened around the same story, where kids, even if you're not from here, you're not moving here when you're 24. You know, if you go away to college, you work in Boston and Portland and Portsmouth for a few years, pay down your student debt, come back here when you're ready to settle down and have a family. And it leaves this gap of like 22 to 32, maybe even a little bit more, of young people who aren't here. And we had lots of these conversations about why that is, what are the barriers, and the kind of conversations kept coming back to student debt. You can just make more money in the city and have a better, more secure job, and then come back here once some of those bills are paid off. If I'm working up here, my student debt doesn't go down, you know, because it's not attached to my wages. And so the tangible solution for us was, okay, nonprofit is going to be a student debt scholarship. So in 2016, we did our first, we just kind of wung it. None of us had ever started a scholarship before. And we put everything together, and that first year we had 12 applicants. And their student debt totaled over $700,000. And we were like, wow, okay, maybe we hit on something here. You know, when we talk about student debt as $1.4 trillion nationally, it's kind of nebulous and up here, right? Like, I've never seen $1.4 trillion, I don't know what that looks like, but I can picture 12 people in my community who are saddled with that $700,000. That's not going back into our economy. It's going away. It's going out. It's going to Sallie Mae. So the goal was to raise enough money to pay off student debt, a person's student debt loans for a year. And then they could then save that $500 a month, put it towards a house, furniture, a new car, quit their second job and coach soccer, otherwise somehow, reinvest that into our own communities. And it really hit off. So now we're in our third year, which is amazing, and so much work, but we're having fun with it. With the help of some community partners, including the Mountain Garden Club, Kiwanis, North Conway Rotary, and the Conway Lions Club, we've been able to give out over $13,000 in student loans, scholarships in 2 years. And this year will be a third. We're hoping to do $9,000 this year. So each of those groups, our community partners, reapportion some of their scholarship dollars that would normally go to a high school student who's leaving the Valley to get into debt, went to now is going to go to, a portion of that's going to come back to a young professional when they're here in the Valley and they're contributing to the economy, which is wonderful. And it makes us really excited that we've got these amazing community partners who are on board with the mission and saying, yeah, this is a good idea, let's keep this going. So again, this is going to be our third year, and we've got a solid group of directors, got about 8 to 10 of us who are meeting once a month, working not only on the scholarship, but other advocacy work in the region. So about a year ago, a colleague of mine and I were getting ready for the leadership graduation in June, and Sununu was going to be here to give the speech, and we were going to hand him this key to the Washington Valley, and it was going to be kind of boring, right? So we thought, we don't have enough work to do. Let's ask him if he'll start a Millennial Advisory Council. And let's start listening to the young people who everyone's saying they want to be here. And so we did, and he said yes. And we said, okay, oh geez, now we got to do this. So that was in June, and in September we finally got all of our ducks in a row. We worked with the State House on how this council was going to work, who was going to sit on it, what we were going to talk about. And so there's 2 people from every county who sit on this council, and then a representative from Nashua and Manchester to have like some listening perspective specific as well. And our first report was due in December, and we quickly split up into working groups. So we've got housing, workforce development, education, and environmental conservation. That's the report, that Betsy was talking about earlier. We kind of all split up into our own working groups and said, here's a millennial perspective, here's what's going on, listen to us, these are the policies that aren't working, these are the policies that need work, here's something that needs attention to. And we will continue to do that as we go through our 2-year terms that we have. And so, given my job at the Land Trust, I'm on the Environment Subcommittee, so I can't seriously speak to the housing, what the Millennial Advisory Council has recommended as far as the housing portion goes, but I can say that I'm a millennial and I live here in Mount Washington Valley and I have a house. So I can understand the struggles of kind of my generation in trying to figure out how to make it work up here. You're working 2 jobs, but if you have a family, forget about it. I mean, I'm lucky that I don't have kids because I can't imagine trying to make it all work and buy diapers. A rental in North Conway is over $1,000 a month if you're talking about 2 bedrooms. If you're talking about 3, upwards of $1,500. About 3 years ago, realizing that it was going to be more affordable to buy a house, I was able to purchase a condo in Saco Woods in North Conway. So I'm coming at it from this perspective of clawing and scratching my way to saving enough for a down payment while still balancing my student loans through working 2 jobs. And that's the kind of people that we have here. We have this whole generation of people who are living and working here because they want to. It's certainly not easy. It's certainly not the millennials that people talk about who are spending all their money on avocado toast. If I hear any more people talk about how millennials and people my age are, demanding and really want handouts, it's just something not true. The people that I know around here are working really hard to try to make things work because this is the lifestyle we want. We want the national forest at our, playground. And we want to contribute. We want to be giving back. We want to volunteer on boards and figure out how to make this community work just as much as anybody. When we talk about what specifically millennials can or would like to see in housing, at the state level we talk about how millennials choose a place to live and then find a job. It's the first generation that looks at where they want to be and then figures out their life from that. So I think that's a different perspective from kind of generations that have come before who are like, okay, well, I got a job at, PwC in Boston, so now I'm in an apartment. It's more like, I'm going to live in Mount Washington Valley because I want to be there, and I'll find a job and move and make it work. So I think that's an interesting perspective that you've got a real desire for people to want to make it work up here. And I think it definitely impacts their search for housing. So I know that was a lot about me and student debt and millennials and the work that Stay MWU is doing to support my generation here in Mount Washington Valley. But like I said, I don't think you can have this conversation about housing without talking about student debt, because my generation is just saddled with, coming out of college with $50,000 to $100,000 in debt. And when I go to the bank and apply for a mortgage, even for a condo, they're looking at my debt to income ratio saying, no way. Like, you can't have a conversation without talking about both things. So I think it's important work that you guys are doing here. I think having the conversation not only on a town level, but on a county level is going to be really important. We've got to get kind of a wider lens on the Mount Washington Valley as a whole, in my opinion. I think that the Housing Coalition is doing just that. So I'm not saying that anyone should duplicate that work at all. I think they're doing a great job. But working with them is going to be important. And I think I wanted to talk a little bit about, living near your job. I think that's important. It's important to think about in Jackson, where are people working? How far are people willing to travel for their jobs? I know tons of people who come down from Twin Mountain, Littleton, that region, even as far as Burlingame, to work in Mount Washington Valley. So I know that they would choose to live closer if it was more affordable. There's a woman who sits on the advisory council with me. She's a co-op representative. And in NW, she works at Gebach and Poodle Couch in Conway, and she lives in Berlin because they can buy a house in Berlin. That is an amazing commute, an hour a day across the Nash in the winter because she can't afford a house here. It's just crazy to me, but that's the kind of thing that when I say that people pick somewhere they want to live and then find a job from there, they'll figure it out.
Did you say that topic, the millennials, did you say it's just in this area that the millennials pick where they want to live and then they get the job, or did you say that in the national?
It's a national thing. It's a national trend that we found from a study that was from the housing report that the Millennial Advisory Council put together, yeah. Other questions?
Well, we can open it to general questions.
Yeah,
if you want. Does anybody have any questions?
So I'm curious, the consultant that will be hired, what's the area of study that person might do that hasn't been done before? I mean, it's novel about their approach.
Well, they're bringing experience that they've had with other towns looking at the same issues. We sort of intentionally wanted someone, maybe outside the community that had that more objective view, that also brought with them, those experiences that other communities have tried. Certainly beyond his own experience, we'll be casting around. There are lots of different towns that have worked on this issue already to some degree, or are starting to work on it because it's, Jesse was mentioning it, that the housing issue is also a national issue. Does that answer your question?
What are the deliverables we're expecting from the consultant relative to Jackson in particular?
Well, the consultant is primarily going to be focused on regulatory changes. And that really means probably changes to our zoning that might help us achieve more housing, the different types of housing that I talked about earlier. We won't be limiting ourselves to just that pursuit, though. That's really the consultant's expertise. But there are other things that can be looked at, even municipal trusts or private trusts that we've already talked with, a limited degree, Habitat for Humanity, working with them. If we had land and they could put up a structure, that might be a good partnership. There's a lot of The state recently offered a tax, the ability to offer a tax abatement to the towns can adopt to bring in business. There's no talk that I've heard about doing that for housing development, but long term, that might be something that we try to get going. Is if someone's willing to do a development and offer housing to within the affordable housing income parameters, that they would get some sort of tax abatement on that development. But there's at this stage, it's really, again, the first step is to find out what does the community want, what do we want to look like. And once we have that picture in front of us, then we can look at where are we at relative to that, and start brainstorming ways that we might get to that point. But it's a widespread problem because it's a difficult problem. It wouldn't be widespread if it was easily solved. And so it is going to, as Betsy was saying, it's going to require some, probably some real out-of-the-box thinking. And there probably won't be any single silver bullet. I think the only way that we'll make any type of real progress is to
I think one thing people often think is that, okay, if Jackson wants workforce housing or seniors housing or some other complex like that, we're going to put in a unit of 40 housing, little apartments or something like that. And that's really not even under consideration. We want to hear what people would like if they're going to be retiring into a senior's home and they'd like it to be in Jackson. What would that be like? And if you need housing for some of the workers at some of the restaurants, what would that be like? We really need to listen to the feedback that you all are going to be giving.
Because, in the same way that we've always been very considerate of the physical aspect of observing that. The community also is something that we all want. It's a small town. Community that's got a lot of knowledge groups.
Yes, that was one of the things I was going to say. We all got the notice in the news to watch Chronicle the other night because it had Jackson on it. And I think that's one of the big concerns of a lot. This town for generations has been an a destination. It's more maybe so than a place to live. It's more been a destination for our inns, our ski areas, the ambiance of the whole area. And I think that's got to be a very big consideration.
Right, and so probably at any sort of weekend point in time, people who are not residents of Jackson, who stay the night in Jackson. But those of us that live here, enjoy the community we have, and think that we'll see it continue in that fashion. And, even those businesses, will start to realize that they have to use it in the community. That's part of what people are coming here and enjoy. It's not just, it's a beautiful place physically, but there's a small town community here that they enjoy being part of that, especially.
And I'd like to add, I can relate, even though the student debt wasn't there, most of us that have had the fortunate to make a decision as yourself, either marrying a native or a local young man or a woman or whatever, to stay here, we did the same thing. You made the choice to stay because of your valley, because of your hiking, your lake streams and so on. And with that, you make a lot of sacrifices and you work the 2, 3, sometimes even, 4 jobs or 7 days a week. And we did do that, the same as you are doing now.
And the part of it too is that, there's the affordability issue, but there's even there is, especially if you're looking for a rental, especially in Jackson, at any price, there isn't anything. So there's a real availability issue, and almost more so than the affordability.
Would there be consideration on not just the resident, but the actual taxpayer also? Because you have many second homes up here. And get their input also, or would this be exclusive to?
Well, it's certainly open to anybody and everybody. The more voices, the better. Those that have second homes tend not to be as involved simply because they're not here, a lot of the time.
So would you do a survey?
But we will be doing a survey, we'll have a website up. So sort of next steps, I'll get into that. We had a town meeting, beyond this meeting, really the next immediate step is a town meeting, and to get the, to have the warrant article passed so that we have the grant to hire the consultant to continue this process. If that were not to happen, it's not, there's a group, well, the planning board, I think, would continue to look into this, but also there's a separate group that would also continue, but certainly having the grant, having that resource to the consultant, would really help us get a jump on things. So the town meeting is really the very first immediate step to get that through and then start working with the consultant. Once we're working with the consultant, then really the first part is going to be an outreach to, provide information to the community, as well as you were talking about, learn what the community wants. And to that end, we're going to have meetings, we'll have a website up, we're going to do some stakeholder interviews, businesses that are having trouble finding staff, because their staff can't find places to live, people that haven't, had to move out of Jackson because they couldn't find a place, people that are living in Jackson but have gone through to, find a place. But, some personal stories. And et cetera. Really, we want to reach as many people as possible that are part of the town and get as much feedback as possible. So we're turning every stone. Yes.
I just wondered, is this chart that your committee came up with?
It's actually a chart that the consultant put together for us. We
And I just wondered, it's where it says 1,082 residents. Does that mean just the full-time residents?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
But it is the U.S. Census, and so,
If you actually go to the U.S. Census, it says that we are 835 or something or other residents.
Right.
But we had 849 people voting in 2016. So we know that some people didn't vote. We know that we have some children here. So we're not a town of 835 if 849 are voting.
Right. Yeah.
Hope.
another big factor in the housing issue, especially at the rental end, is that, a lot of the very limited rental stock that we do have in Jackson and in the valley more generally, we're even losing that to Airbnb rentals, as opposed to long-term rentals. And so, maybe there's some out-of-the-box ideas that, that we can use to incentivize property owners and landlords to rent long-term as opposed to Airbnb. But that's a pretty significant factor at this point. I think the valley has got some of the most Airbnb rentals, at least in the state, if not more regionally. And I believe Jackson is sort of the real hot spot even in the valley.
So Scott, like the number, it says right now, vacancy rate in Carroll County is 1.1%, but I think we know that our vacancy rate is way lower than
It's probably
that.
zero.
It's 0%.
Even when I was renting, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and even then in Jackson, you needed to know someone that was about to move out so that you could, you wouldn't go to the paper to find a place in Jackson. You really had to know someone that was moving, and, jump in as quickly as possible.
Airbnb is still a little bit new to me. Do we have any restrictions in Jackson?
There are really no,
None.
and it's, restricting something like that would probably have to come, start at the state level before, these towns really had something to work with, I would guess. And, to some degree, much more limited degree, sometimes a young couple can buy a house because they can, if it has, a mother-in-law apartment, an auxiliary dwelling unit, they can buy the house and afford the mortgage because they know they can Airbnb that apartment out. So on occasion, it can work in sort of a positive way in one sense, but overall, the negative impact it has on the available rental stock is much more dramatic.
Scott, how many people are on your committee right now?
14,
And we have numbers here tonight? Would you kind of stand up and be recognized, please? Here we are. I guess the reason I'm asking that is that I think this is not just, I'm Bill Terry, I'm chair of the planning board, and these two folks that are standing up in front here are wonderful people. I know you know them. And I've only been around for a few years in town, and they've been here, they would say, probably not forever, but from my perspective, it's close. And they're very much committed to the community. I think everyone who stood up is very much committed to this community. And I think many of us in this room, just because we're here, we're committed to this community. I think it's very important what we have as the next step is getting the warrant article approved so we can move forward with this activity with a little help. When we first talked about this, I thought it was a little bit pie in the sky because I'm kind of skeptical, like many of us are, about whether or not there are real opportunities in town for increasing availability of housing regardless of affordability. This whole idea of affordable is kind of like another tier up. Available housing even, that is going to be accessible to folks. And I have to say that with my limited thought process, I don't see it. And that's because I'm limited. In my view, in my vision, I think I'm limited. And I don't have all the answers or all the ideas. And I think it'd be exceptionally useful for us to understand as a community what our options are, what possibilities are there. And to have somebody come from outside who's done this with other communities successfully, which is useful, to help us think through some of the things that we might be able to do and see what the possibilities are. I don't know what they are. I have no idea. But to do that, I think it is a good investment in the community. The fact that we've been able to, and Scott, Betsy have worked hard to get an MTAG process available to us, so we got the state funding, most of it, is a good deal for us. And so for a very small amount of dollars for the town, we can really open our eyes to what the possibilities are. So I think from that perspective, it's a good effort. It'll answer a bunch of questions that I think many of us have, like what could we do, what's the shoulda, woulda, coulda? And instead of saying shoulda, woulda, coulda, find out what they are. And instead of sitting there with platitudes, as we have in our planning a document about how we're so much vested in our community and growing our community and ensuring that our community is available to a wide range of people, actually do something about it. And stop just talking about it and seeing if there are ways to get from here to there. So I applaud the effort, and I hope everyone does come out to support it at the town meeting.
Nancy, can you, what is the amount that the vote is going to be for? What are,
Okay, so the whole grant is for $17,550, and the town portion is, I think it's $36,050, about under 3,700 is what the town portion is. Now, we've already raised close to 2,000 privately. So we hope by the time it gets to town meeting, we'll say we really don't need any money, or yes, we need 1,200 or 1,800 or whatever it is. But we're not going to need 37,000 from the town.
That's the good news.
So, certainly, anyone that would like to help, any help would be very much appreciated. And probably the best way, if you're interested, is to contact either me or Betsy. While we do this, we'll pass something around and, so is there a spot to, for donation requests on there? But
I didn't think to bring that. That was pretty dumb. But, you happen to have one?
Should I run some copies off?
Why not? That'd be wonderful. And in the interim, what I'll pass around is, I'm sure there are a bazillion questions that you may have developed and you may just not want to ask yet or something or other. So I'll pass this around. It gives you an opportunity to put down who you are and that you want to be contacted about some more information.
And to be kept in the loop as to, meetings and et cetera.
Scott, assuming we raise the money and it passes the town, what's your timeline of the person starting, the report from him?
We'll be starting immediately.
No, do you have any idea how long his work will be before there's something?
We have to complete it by December 31st of this year.
If we want to make any regulatory changes, for the next town meeting. Obviously the work, that sort of brackets our work with the consultant. Our work will be continuing past that.
Scott, it sounds, you described that this person's position will mostly be working on regulatory changes. Has there been any discussion on what kind of regulatory changes?
I mean, not really, no. Jackson does have something in place right now that's intended to incentivize, some portion of the development being put into affordable housing.
Can you explain what that is? What that incentive is? Because I haven't heard of that before.
It's in broad terms, you can have a couple additional units within the development that you otherwise couldn't, so long as those units are directed at people within a particular income bracket.
Yeah, the
And that's
maximum,
not going to give you better.
the maximum housing price right now that you can have for quote-unquote workforce housing is $211,000, I think, can be the maximum price. And even that really is too steep for many families. So if somebody were willing to, I think the way the ordinance is written right now, that if you're willing to create 12 units or up to 12 units on a particular parcel of land, then for every 4 units, I guess, you get 1 extra unit that would be priced at the workforce level. So again, it's for really small changes, really small adaptations to our current landscape where we could allow a little bit tighter density if the contractor's willing to do an extra.
But that's that kind of development, isn't happening in Jackson at all right now. Let alone, bring in some affordable housing on top
I
of it.
still don't understand what the incentive is,
They can
from a
construct-
builder's or
You
developer's
get one extra
perspective.
unit for every, I forget if it's 3 or 4 units.
It's really limited. It's exceptionally limited. But yes, there is an opportunity for a developer, whether doing a subdivision, to get an extra unit or two in.
Regardless of soil type?
No. Oh, no. It simply allows, well, maybe it does, but
Well, I have to look at it.
But what it does is it allows for whatever frontages or whatever, it enables someone who's going to do a subdivision development, which, how many of those have we had most recently? I guess what I'm suggesting is that we have something on the books, but what we have on the books, the chance that it's actually going to happen in town is close to nil. So it's like saying, yeah, we have great, wonderful things available for somebody who wants to come in and develop property here in town, but there's no developable property in town to even apply against what we have on the books. So it's almost moot that we have it. So it's hard to talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, we're great, we do wonderful things, but it's against something that's not, doesn't seem like it's gonna happen.
It doesn't, we just aren't having that type of development going on in any case, so there hasn't been an opportunity to actually affordable housing through it. It's something we try, but it's not
Has
achievable.
anybody ever applied through that? Since we've had it on the books, that's how old that we've been.
It came into the zoning ordinance in 2008, I believe, and as far as I know, nobody has applied for it. And actually, when we developed it, we had Mike Now on the planning board as a member, and we asked him, what kinds of incentives might a developer want? And he thought that it was workable, but Jackson has boulders, wetlands, a lot of things that we struggle with, and it doesn't make it easy.
But, I guess, until we work with consultants, we look at what other towns are doing, we can't say in this, frontage or setback or, anything in particular where we see an opportunity to look at all of our zoning and see, what could make a difference.
It seems like you're using the terms workforce housing and affordable housing interchangeably. Is that true?
No, not entirely. I think part of the problem is when you say affordable housing, people think you're going to send the bus down to Manchester and pick up homeless people and bring them up here. And that's not what we're doing. We're looking to house people who already are in this area, working, 2 jobs maybe, working in a restaurant, working somewhere else. There's plenty of those people right here who need lower cost housing. And so there definitely is a need for affordable housing for a variety of people. People in the workforce need housing, seniors need housing. What we're looking for is diversity of housing right in Jackson. When you look at this chart, I think they said there are two homes that have been on the market recently that are under 300,000 or something like that. That's not very workable for a lot of the younger families that would love to have lived here, and for the seniors that want to leave, sell their more expensive home and move to something smaller, move to something lower maintenance. We don't have an easy time offering that.
And so I asked because I think what we've seen in Conway, at least in the workforce / affordable housing that they have there, is that oftentimes the people who are applying and getting into those units are elderly and retired people, which is of course important because they need low cost housing as well. But if that happens here, and it's not necessarily going to increase your diversity.
Right.
So just having that awareness, I think, will be important in your process.
That's great.
And when we talk about workforce housing, that certainly there's a need, especially the employers that have larger staffs and hotels and restaurants. There's clearly a need valley-wide for housing for that type of workforce. I've talked to restaurants that had to close down sections this summer because they couldn't find the staff, the full staff. But that probably would be the most challenging type of housing to put into Jackson. As Becky said, we don't envision an apartment building going up in Jackson. And that's really what you're talking about here, that traditional definition of workforce housing. I think when Jackson talks about workforce housing, it's more, as I said before, it's the teachers in town, it's the police officers in town, it's the firefighters in town, it's the road crew in town, the town administrators, it's the people, whose job is impacted by whether they can live in the community they serve or not. I think those are people that Jackson might be able to provide some sort of solution for, and are probably, important for Jackson to provide some sort of solution.
I assume this consultant is going to be Jackson-specific, but it's really a valid problem. Have you ever reached out to other planning?
Well, in fact, the Economic Council, the Housing Coalition, which is somewhat part of the Economic Council, is acting as our fiscal agent so that we can take donations and have them go to a nonprofit. I think the way the Housing Coalition, I'll sort of speak for Victoria's, I think they see themselves as more of an umbrella organization for the whole valley. I think they would love to see this type of initiative to pop up in every town in the valley, because it's, the Housing Coalition can't really make changes in Jackson. That has to come from within Jackson. So the Housing Coalition, I think, serves as a resource for this discussion, but for things to change, really have to change it.
And what they have done, actually, the Housing Coalition, for the last, at least 2 years, since 2013, they've done what's called charrettes in the valley. So they've done 2 in Bartlett. One, as you're driving into a Bartlett village, you pass those blue cottages on the left, and it says A Better Life. So they did a charrette there to envision how that might be adapted to workforce housing units. And then they did another charrette right near the Attitash horse. Okay. And then they did one in Center Conway, or maybe 2 in Center Conway. They did one in Freiburg. So they are doing these charrettes that are intended to sort of open the eyes of people in the valley that, okay, so here's this old structure that's been here forever. Maybe it could be repurposed into housing. So again, they're trying to envision things that would fit in each community where they would be developed.
I think it's great that as many people have come out tonight. And it really, I think the word that keeps getting repeated over and over is community. And I think we all have a stake in our community. The young people in town, the older people in town, the locals, and my parents were from Ireland, and it was always called the blow-ins, the people who come in, and they're not really from here, but they want to be part of the community. They moved here and really want a sense of, they loved what Jackson, offers to them, and that includes the people who purchase homes here and maybe don't live here. So I think they should certainly be involved in the conversation, but I think there are lots of possibilities, and we are a resort town, and it's becoming more and more apparent. I mean, I don't know, we all are seeing it. There's more and more people out on this skiing and parking in the ski areas and hiking and climbing, and that's all great. But we need to really focus and preserve what we have. And I think you look at other resort towns for one and see what they have done or doing to preserve. But I'm happy the planning board has moved into the in-law apartments, because that seems like a really good resource and maybe somewhat untapped. It's somewhat not known how they could be used. But I know that Marianne Jackson, I just received something from her in town where they're actually matching older people and younger people. So it's older people who want to stay in their homes and younger people who've moved into town, and they might live with that person and rent a room or live there and cohabitate and allow that older person to stay where they are longer. So there's so many things out there that maybe right now we don't know about, but we just have to have hope and believe in our community, I guess.
I'm hoping that some of those ideas are the kinds of things that we actually do talk about as part of this process. I think Scott suggested that, there might be some things regulatorily that we could offer out, but from what I've heard on the preliminary, this is really an open discussion, and it's about resources, and it's about trying to work through the idea of community to make things happen. And I don't see how it happens without that.
And I would say, just in my humble opinion, that there may be some regulatory changes that we can make that help, but I'm convinced that we're not going to get there through simply regulatory changes. We're going to have other ideas, other ways of addressing things. And it may be that, once we bootstrap our way sort of in the right direction, and we'll start to move on our own a little bit. It's going to be a lot of work, and
It starts with you all coming out tonight. Thanks very much for being here.
We have a couple more questions.
I was the chairman of the planning board back in 1992, and Robbie was on the planning board with me at the same time. And this is not a new subject. This is something that we broached then because we were much younger men at the time, and we saw friends of ours moving into this community who could not afford to stay here, who had to, most of them have ended up in Brownfield or some other place, and for some fortuitous reason, we ended up being here. So this is not, I'm kind of frustrated that I'm sitting here 25 years after the fact, having to go through something which is completely reactionary when we wanted to be proactive at that time. And I'm not saying that we're wasting our time, but the planning board, I've supported a lot of different things over the years, but we need to look at, I've raised animals and on and on. I've seen the fragmentation of habitat because of the lot size by soil type that we've created, and I'm a geologist. It made a lot of sense, but now I see more bears in my yard affecting my livestock and on and on. So everything that we do that we think might be visionary is actually reactionary. And my theory now, as somebody who supported large lots, is cluster density. And that's nothing that, I don't know how to reinvent the wheel, because we've just gone on and on and on with all these manifestations of different ideas. When I was on the planning board, I feel as though we were fortunate to have a circuit rider planner from the North Country Council to provide us with advice, because at least in terms of the regulatory and legal ramifications, they were very thorough and concise. But as far as affordable housing, I built a house 7 or 8 years ago for $89 a square foot. It used to cost me $25 to get a building permit in this town. I rebuilt a house that's falling into the ground and had to pay $1,200 for a building permit. I feel like I'm living in Massachusetts now. And it frustrates me because I grew up in Coos County. So I've got master's credits in community development. And I'm frustrated when I look at what's going on in Jackson, and I kind of try to mind my own business. Here we are. What do we do? I don't want my kids to come back to this town. They could, because I have the property, that will give them that opportunity. But are they going to be able to go to college, as, I don't remember your name, a millennial, as you said, are they going to be able to go to college, come back to this valley, and get a job where they could come back to Jackson and buy a piece of property and build their own house? No, not a chance. That horse left the barn 30 years ago.
But the other side of the coin is jobs.
Economic, there we go. That, I was thinking the same thing, Scott, as I was driving down. Opportunity.
That's something else to the valley.
So does somebody want to invest in putting a college down in North Carolina so they can provide good jobs?
UNH Northern Campus.
There we go.
The closest thing to a silver bullet but jobs and you know, we're really strained here, but, you know, the valley has gone so far into retail. 15 years from now, 25 years from now, certainly, retail is not going to exist like we know it.
And it's also the service sector.
And so we need to look at where the valley's done.
We need to provide jobs. And the irony to me is, if you want to know what New Hampshire's really like, drive 20 miles north of here. That's it. That's it. Coos County. And then drive down the Connecticut River Valley. Jackson is not a representation of New Hampshire. And here we want to allow people to just come in here and, okay, well, we don't allow trailers, which is fine, but
I don't think so.
we're kind of handcuffed as far as the opportunities that we can provide unless we change some of the zoning regulations, or at least make accommodations for somebody who's willing.
Well, you mentioned cluster development, that, you know, that's a model that, you know, that.
Well, the funny thing is, you know, my building inspector is telling me that I cannot build a house for less than $130 a square foot, because that's what the tax is. Well, the last house that I built it had an elevator and radiant heat in the entire house. It was $89 a square foot for a house the same size as the Whitney Center. $660,000, but we paid $1 million for the Whitney Center. So I was like, wow, I could have done well there.
Yeah, but Russell, you can have trailers in Jackson. That's not.
You know that, don't you?
Yes, I do. And I have affordable housing on Davis Lane.
We also
for 30 years.
Are we also looking to other states? You know, for example, in Vermont, if you own a second home in Vermont, you pay almost twice the taxes if you're not a home, if you don't live there. If it's a second home, they nail you.
I know Stowe in particular has done a lot of work towards housing. We're looking at Stowe, we're looking at a couple towns in Massachusetts. I mean,
and that's but that particular thing is statewide. That's not townwide.
Right.
It's statewide.
And that's where I was getting to, where state has made available to towns in Jackson and in New Hampshire to offer tax abatements for business development. You know, maybe down the road there'll be something like that towns can adopt to offer towards, you know, housing development. But at the moment, that's not. I don't believe there's any real discussion going on about that. But yeah, that's what it would take to use that sort of incentive at the state level. And any other questions? Right? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for coming.